All right, man. Okay, so today we have Mr. Alex Effer on the call. I do have to say I'm part of the Alex Effer fan club. I think I've bought like all your shit. So, well, I take that back. I haven't bought the upper and lower extremity programs that you've done, but I'm in the vault. I've taken your Evolve mentorship, I guess, twice now. I use your variation of expansion compression models every single day. And it's been super, super helpful with, helping my clients out, helping myself out. So yeah, I think I've, brown nosed you enough here, but
yeah, I don't know what else to say. I'm done.
You're done. Okay. We'll sign off here.
Sign off now. Exactly.
But how about you go ahead and just give us the elevator pitch. Who is Alex Effer? What do you do? Talk about Canada, all that stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, it's cold in Canada right now. I mean, what else is new? But no, man, thanks. I really appreciate you having me on. We've known each other for 2 years now, I think. And, we never met in person, only met through Zoom. So I'm looking forward to that.
We're still internet friends.
Exactly. We're still internet friends. We still haven't progressed the relationship yet. But yeah, no, I mean, I'm based out of Toronto, Canada. Before COVID, I was working in a bunch of different clinics. I'd honestly wanted to get in this industry to work with professional athletes. And so when I first started the industry, I was working with professional athletes, but I was also working in the rehab clinics as well. So kind of doing both on either end of the day. So in the morning, I'd go to the clinic, and in the evening, I'd go work with athletes from amateur to professional. And a lot of them were hockey players at the time, and some basketball players. But then what I found was, because I was kind of doing this education, learning about how the body works from, I guess you could say like outside of the box perspective, where, it wasn't just the joint that was the issue, it wasn't a certain area, but how the whole system integrates together and how that influences movement. And so by doing that, I just kind of got this rep in the clinics I was working at as the person who, if things weren't really working, they kind of send them to me, and I would kind of have this different perspective before they would maybe send them off to somebody else or refer to somebody else, right? Like whether it's like an oral facial person, or, go to a surgeon, whatever that may be, just to clear off all the options. And so I just kind of got pigeonholed into the rehab world, which honestly, I love. Like I love looking at the body from this perspective. And and then progressing from there, I worked at the university where I consulted on all the different sports teams. More specifically, I was brought in to help with injury prevention, like quotations, right? Air quotes. But yeah, but like the whole purpose is that, like for example, the football team had 80 players, but 60 of them got hurt during training camp. And so obviously something that they were doing within the weight room or outside the weight room, like their training volume just wasn't there, right? It was just too high, especially for a lot of these people, right? Like these people or these kids are not well trained. I mean, they're football players, but they don't know anything about the weight room. And so overloading them, putting bars on their backs and stuff like that. Like I was really there to help reconstruct the program for the off season and try to build a progressive model of exercises. I was actually asked to write my progression and regression for squats, deadlifts, shoulder pressing, and like they just kind of followed that through the entire off season, the different progressions. And so this was when I was 23 years old. So I was kind of thinking about the stuff that I'm thinking about now, but I was just kind of experimenting. I didn't really understand it. I was just, trying to plug through it. And during the time I was at the universities working at clinics, I took a bunch of PRI. Then I met a guy named Mike Roncarati, who shout out to him. I think he's working with Memphis Grizzlies now, but he was working with Atlanta Hawks at the time. And I heard him on a podcast, and I really liked the way that he integrated a lot of the things that I was thinking about and testing. So I spent a few days with him when he was in town, and we lifted and yeah, we were just kind of talking about how to integrate this stuff. So it wasn't just laying on my back, breathing all the time, or following a specific algorithm, but thinking outside of the box again, but applying it to training like with the weight room with athletes, and how that spectrum can be developed from somebody who's in pain or somebody who's an athlete who needs to get back on the field as quickly as possible, right? So then fast track, I left all those places. I was working one-on-one with my own clients, going to their houses, and then COVID hit. I didn't have anybody. I couldn't see anybody. And so um, people like I met Katie St. Clair and Greg Hawthorne, and they kind of pushed me to start to push out some of the information that I'd been using with my clients or I'd been talking to them about. And so then I put together Evolve, and I think it's the 10th time now that I'm running it, or the ninth time. And the first couple times, I think you were in the second one. It was like 4 weeks, like it was 8 weeks or 12 weeks of content jammed into four. And so still trying to figure it out. And then, I think I've got kind of a good rhythm with it now, and it's 8 weeks. I think I'm going to potentially expand it to longer, just because I think there's some other topics. Yeah, maybe like 10 weeks or 12
Yeah.
weeks.
No, I will definitely say, as someone who's taken it twice, like it's definitely way more organized than the second time through. You're doing great. Like it's progressed very well.
Yeah. No, you know what? It was just like every time I do it, I get feedback. Like I send out a survey and stuff like that, and I really listen to it. And I mean, just like the name Evolve Mentorship, it's always evolving. And so what I wanted to do was expand. Like one of the comments was, hey, it needs to be a little bit longer. Like we need to explore some more information. So I made the programming 2 weeks. I kept the assessment the way it is, but I changed the way that I presented it. I'm going to expand more on the assessment in the newer Evolve. It's probably going to be next year. And then going after case studies, but doing live case studies and adding tutorials. So I started doing that, and then I met you through these kind of things. I've been doing virtual consulting with people such as yourself and other trainers and therapists, either on them or working with their clients or consulting on their clients, and then put together upper and lower body program, because it seemed like that's what everyone else was doing, putting together programs, and I just kind of wanted to have my spin on it. And when I put together my upper body program, one of the things that I found that a lot of programs were doing is this kind of self-directed assessment, and like applying the program to where they were so they can see their own objective measurements improving. No different than when I'm working with a client, I use the objective measures like shoulder flexion or hip flexion to show them that, hey, you're progressing, right? Like the things that we're doing is going to help progress. And then explain a little bit more about why I picked the exercise and how I sequenced it. And so that's kind of the upper and lower body program. And then, I'm going to be potentially putting out a foundations program. I'm not sure when, but like, again, something else with Evolve is like, how can I bridge the gap, right? If people are very new to the industry, they don't want to jump to Evolve too early. It's just like, here's an interim. So let me put that together, and now I'm here sitting with you.
Now we're here. So I think one thing that I truly enjoyed, especially after taking PRI, taking some of the other courses, is just I enjoy the expansion and compression model, and just speaking in those terms. So I think if you don't mind just kind of giving us your quick little spiel on what that really looks like and means to you, and how that maybe like differentiates into just like how people might look at like breathing or neuro too. I think that's
So PRI, when I first took it, they were talking about breathing and gait. Like they're really the first ones that I found that were really integrating movement into two different principles or two different contexts, so that you can understand how certain joints would move relative to something else. So for example, like instead of looking at shoulder internal rotation as something to do with the joint, it may have to do with something above or beyond that, such as, hey, you have lungs inside your ribs, they expand. that expansion from the inside is then going to change the position of your socket. And then, so that's more inhalation biased. And then exhalation is more of a compression bias. And I say bias because not everywhere is compressing at the same time. It's compressing at different rates. So for example, like when I do a push-up, in order for my shoulder blades not to kind of, or in order for my chest not to fall towards the ground, I need to maintain some type of tension in my upper back. And that's via rhomboids, middle traps, and serratus anterior, like stuff like that to hold me there. So I'm going to have more compression in the backside, but because I'm going down into a push-up, I'm going to expand, or I'm going to essentially like open up my chest a little bit. And if you hold the bottom of the push-up and you breathe in, you'll feel kind of where that expansion is and isn't happening. And so essentially, PRI was talking about breathing, and they were talking about how you can drive airflow into specific regions, like for example, certain areas of your rib cage. So to get your chest wall open, improving internal rotation. And then, so that was great. So they were really explaining that. Osteopathy, they talk about the concept of compression and decompression. And PRI is starting to go that way now, I think, where they start to use those terms. But really where I heard about compression expansion first was from Bill Hartman. And he was talking about how, it was very similar to PRI, just said a different way. And I really liked how he broke down gait and breath together and how he kind of combined the movements together. So for example, you've got 3 phases of gait: heel strike, mid stance, toe off. And at different phases of that gait cycle can correlate to different positions or different changes in the pelvis and the rib cage that again would be associated to breathing or expansion and compression. And so for me, it's just a way to further dig deeper into gait and breathing and how they kind of relate to each other and how we can put people in certain positions to either take away or improve mobility in certain areas.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
What I really liked about it, and especially like with your course too, is I think it does well. And I would say this for Bill too, like, everyone always shits on PRI. And it's like, well, PRI isn't training. And it's like, yes, but we still want to use those sort of overarching principles.
Yeah.
To sort of build a program that makes sense. And I mean, I don't want to call it injury prevention, but it's sort of at least just, it can still bias the direction that client needs to go to maintain mobility at a minimum. Right.
Exactly. And like for me, like, PRI, they were very much like positional breathing is key to unlocking, joint range of motion. And that's great because you have other systems who just want to crank through joint ranges of motion without respecting positions, right? Yeah. And so, like for me, when they were starting to talk about training, like again, I took PRI. First course I ever took was 7 years ago, and they hadn't really come out with their fitness program yet. And when they came out,
I started with.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that must have been like drinking out of a fire hose.
It was everything it was the first 3 primaries in one course.
Yeah.
With cross kinet lunges. Like,
yeah. But like, you know what? Yeah. You know what though? Like what I really liked about it was that it was integrating all of them together. And that was something that I was looking for. And that was my major criticism when I took all 3. And I took all 3 within 3 months. Like each month I took a different one. Jeez. And so I really dove deep into it.
Yeah, you talk about drinking from the fire hose.
Exactly. So it was tough, right? And but what I think they were trying to get at, I mean, maybe they poorly named it. I can't remember what it's called, like PRI fitness or whatever.
Yeah.
Like I don't think PRI is fitness. Like that's the thing, and that is the distinguishing factor that I found is that fitness is about trying to drive physiological changes, right? Whether that is increasing blood volume, increasing blood flow to certain areas, that is increasing cross-sectional area of muscle, like increasing cardiovascular efficiency, like stuff like that. But that is fitness. You're trying to change biomarkers essentially, right? Or these different parameters, fitness parameters. Whereas rehab is more about learning and trying to create new motor pathways in order to learn movement to open up variability. Now, where they kind of cross together, that's where that's where there's a spectrum, right? You've got rehab way on one side where some people need to start with like low level movement, really focusing on internal cues like, hey, I really want you to feel this part of your foot, the ball of the big toe, the outside of the heel, while also feeling, kind of like your lower back sinking to the ground, like something on their back. And then fitness is when you are now taking what you've learned and now throwing perturbations at it. Now what I'm going to get you to do is I'm going to get you to hold a dumbbell on this side, and I'm going to get you to do it for tempo and capacity. Right now, I'm training that thing. Now, fitness does have elements of rehab, and rehab does have elements of fitness. Like I want them to be, synonymous to each other. But for some people, it isn't. And that's where we kind of get mixed up. And I think PRI, I think they had a hard time with that. They were trying to use rehab moves and make them look like fitness, where you're just focusing on internal cues, right? Without respecting the fact that, hey, you still got to load things. You still got to do things for endurance, right? Like doing positional breathing or doing positional movements, really focusing on when I'm going to inhale, when I'm going to exhale may not be the most efficient all the time.
Right.
But what we can do, as you said, is we can take principles from that, focusing on movement and applying it to training. It's like, hey, I'm going to load you up. What I'm going to do is I'm going to elevate your heel, because automatically your body is going to organize itself to make the changes that we want. You don't even know that it's happening. It's happening because I've put that constraint of a heel wedge, right? And so then you can start, I'm going to hold the dumbbell in the opposite arm, or I'm going to have two dumbbells and I'm going to train it for tempo. But the arm that's holding the leg that's forward, that same arm, so the ipsilateral arm is just going to hold the dumbbell heavier than the contralateral arm when I'm doing like a lunge, right? So you can integrate them together. It's just, you have to understand that we still have to load people if they want fitness adaptations, because if we don't load them, then that's where, we're going to start to get into issues that they're not getting their goals, and we're just focusing on movement all the time. And movement is the precursor to fitness. Like we should be driving fitness adaptations on top of a good movement foundation. Mm-hmm. But we need to be able to integrate both of them together.
Exactly. Well, and that's where your course and like really shines, in my opinion. Like it's taking your courses allowed me to live in that gray.
Yeah.
Which, everyone hates. It's like, you're either a trainer or you're a therapist. It's like, well, so people need you to be both a lot of the times.
That's it. And that's it. Like, that's the thing. And where I started to progress and start to move away from PRI a little bit, and like learning from PRI, DNS, FRC, like Bill Hartman, like FMS, like I took that way back, SFMA, like combining all these different models and ways of looking, I started to like extrapolate things, test things like, what phase of gait could you logically determine would be more biased towards aerobic capacity or anaerobic capacity, or anaerobic power, aerobic power, like all these things. And so, what would tempo be more biased towards, expansion or more compression? To me, I see it as more expansion, because what you're doing is you're driving blood into that area, driving blood flow into the tissue, which expands the tissue from the inside out, right? And so now you're starting to get expansion in a different way. And then, like, for example, like I posted a couple of days ago about like holding a leg extension at a certain angle to bias certain movement at the knee. So teach you how to create more of the tibia to internally rotate to allow you to bend your knee, but that's still going to be training your VMO. Like, you're going to feel your leg shaking. It's still hard work. It's still going to get your patellar tendon loaded, right? So we're still going to get these loading strategies that we want. It's just we're being smart with it. We're organizing our training so that, look, I know based on your assessment that we need these kind of movements to improve. But you're coming to me because you want to do more fitness, not so much rehab. So we're going to do these positions, but I'm going to load you in a certain way that is more expansion bias versus just compressing you further because your center of gravity is already over your toes. You know what I mean?
No, definitely. And I mean, that's what I've used in, building out the Broken to Beast. I mean, it's literally using your model for fitness aspects and
Yeah,
hypertrophy. But
exactly.
one thing I think I've even tried or I've been messing around with too is like, how can I make, I found it interesting when you said like the cueing, like,
Yeah.
rehab has all these internal cues and all of this, whereas fitness is like grip and rip, if you would.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
there's also like a spectrum, I think, that we can apply like RPEs or reps in reserve. And
Yeah.
in the program, I literally have like, okay, this is a 6 to 7 RPE.
Yeah.
And I also put in there in bold, like control. I want
Yeah.
more control with this. I need you to feel the
Yeah.
correct muscles.
Mhm.
Whereas in another part of the program, it's like RPE 9 and it just says pump. It's like, I
Mhm.
just want you to grip and rip. And that's more unconscious fitness or going that direction. Whereas these other aspects, we need the control, some of the, at least 1 to 3 of the internal cues potentially there still.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll say this, I've seen your program Broken to Beast and it looks freaking awesome. So like I
I'm
really
pumped.
like how I'll take my paycheck now. No.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
No, yeah. No, but like what I like about it is, something that I didn't do really, like it wasn't really my intention, but like really progressing, as you said, like adding fitness adaptations to somebody who either maybe hasn't really moved a lot or somebody who wants to not only put on size but wants to improve movement. And so that's what I really liked about it. And like that's where I see things going. I see things
Right.
like trainers and even therapists becoming smarter with movement, but understanding how to apply load and these fitness qualities to that. Like that is so they've got, so this person may have pain or something like that. You're appreciating the pain, but you're understanding, hey, maybe this isn't moving. No problem. We'll address that. Let's just change up the variation of the split squat. Maybe you're doing a lateral lunge instead of a split squat, or maybe you're doing a front foot elevated split squat. So you're modifying the way that you're doing it, but the outcome is still going to be the same. You're starting to get a training effect, and potentially some pain is going to start to, become overcome. And obviously, like pain is, there's more to it. It's multifaceted, but the reality is like if I don't focus on your pain, or if I just say, hey, look, this is going to improve range of motion and this is going to distribute force so you're not having so localized pain, I've now just talked to them, desensitized them a little bit. I'm not saying, whoa, like that's bad, like you should really not, bend over. Like of course, like there's your biopsychosocial model at play right there. Understanding that, hey, they feel scared to do certain movements. Okay, no problem. I will get you to do this movement instead. It is going to help this way. They become desensitized. So now I've got the biopsychosocial model, and I've got the mechanical, fitness, physiological, um, you know, principle or concept at play as well. So I get the merging, right? Like biopsychosocial is communication. It is reducing their perception of threat. And so like people like always say, oh, well, you're reducing pain, but that's, pain is multifaceted. It's like, well, are you talking to your client? It's like, one person said to me early on in my career that all of us are uncertified behavioral specialist, or not behavioral specialist. Yeah, behavioral specialist, right? Like where you're essentially communicating with these people, you're influencing their behavior, which then influences their perception of threat and their psychology. And so it's like we are giving them exercises. That is our medium of exchange, essentially. That is our medium to help people. We're using movement as a way to improve everything else, all the other systems. and influencing their psychology, influencing their perception. And so, yeah, so where I think we're going is I think we're going through a combination of all of that. We're understanding movement better, we're understanding fitness better, and understanding how to connect them together so that the rehab and the fitness are not so far apart.
Yeah.
You know.
No, I completely agree. I mean, again, I think that's why we vibe. It,
Yeah.
in terms of, here's a funny question. Do you think that the fitness and rehab industry has been more of a detriment to society in,
Detriment to society.
or do you think it has bettered us?
Okay, so I think I think in some ways, like, look, whenever there's more information out there, there's more problems that arise because people learn more, they understand more, and then they start self-diagnosing themselves because they have all these things. And then now they think that a rounded shoulder is an issue that's going to cause pain, and everything now becomes cause and effect. And that's just not the case, right? Like, for example, like, okay, so posture is the way that I view it is posture is like a snapshot of movement, right? There's no such thing as static posture. We're constantly moving. We've got gravity crushing us and we've got ground reaction forces crushing us. And our bodies have to make these small micro adjustments in order to resist those external forces, right? So, what our posture is a reflection of us managing those forces and a combination or a compounding of the environment that we put ourselves in. Like if I'm a professional athlete playing hockey all the time, or I'm a golfer, let's say, like I'm constantly going to be doing this one type of rotation all the time. It makes sense that I'm going to get better at one kind of rotation, but maybe neglect the other side. And so I may have these postural asymmetries, apart, like other than the natural asymmetries that we have, but compensatory asymmetries that we develop from playing our sport or sitting down at a desk that will manifest in posture. But what I do is, like, so we start talking about, like, okay, the pelvis is rotated to the right, where it's oriented to the right, and the rib cage counter rotates back to the left, right? And so we talk about this with people, and we have to be very careful because some people interpret it as, I'm twisted. Holy crap. If I take one step, my pelvis is going to obliterate. You know what I mean? Like, it's going to explode. And so I think from that aspect, I think the more information that we get, we just have to pair that with understanding how to communicate it as well. I think that has been one detriment where people don't understand the concepts. They just try to memorize information and then they post it to the masses. And then people then come and ask questions about, hey, this is great. I love it. It makes sense. It sounds a lot like me. I mean, I can't tell you how many messages I get when I post something. Is somebody like, that's exactly how I feel. Being able to, respond to them in a way that isn't more triggering or is not going to put them on a rabbit hole that of misinformation, if you want to call it that, right? Like, there's a lot of people out there who post, they don't really know what they're posting about. They're kind of just regurgitating information. And then when people question them, they give them, false, like, answers that aren't true. And then that's where you get this, like, broken telephone effect of information that was from the original source was said, and then they're going to get a totally different message from that may be poor because of the fact that the person who is regurgitating it didn't know the information, if that makes sense. So I think the detriment comes from that type of broken telephone, and not understanding concepts before presenting them. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think to that extent, that's kind of where the detriment is. More information leads to more confusion, which leads to people thinking more in absolutes, and then more causal effects. This rounded shoulder equals shoulder pain. It's like, no. Posture is a way to, as I said, to look at what or how people are managing stress or load, and they may not be adaptable. And our goal is to make them adaptable. Am I saying that a rounded shoulder is going to cause pain? No. Could it? I don't know. Maybe. Posture is not a good predictor of pain. But what it can do is it can show you how the body is moving or what strategies they are using, therefore, what they do and do not have, and then give them or give the body the more options, more mobility in certain areas so that they can move without, you know, driving all the force to this one area that has no right to distribute force. Like people get back pain and they say, I feel it right there. And they point to one spot. It's like, okay, well, that means the hip's not moving properly because the hip should really be absorbing force. The knee is probably not in a position to absorb force. That foot is not dynamic. And so what they have to do is, in a compensatory way, they've got to arch their back, or they've got to use some type of extension strategy or some low back extension to, which causes pain potentially, maybe not, may not ever, right? But maybe for them, it causes that issue. And then we distribute load more effectively by creating more movement. And then, pain starts to improve, right?
Right. No, I've always, or especially since taking the Evolve mentorship, I've been looking at posture and like whatever weird quote unquote thing that it might look like. That's a side effect, just as like pain.
Exactly.
Like it's not necessarily a causal thing.
No, but it allows you to understand how people are moving and like,
yeah, it's what why? I use to like predict, or not predict, but like create a hypothesis off of. It's like, okay, that looks funky.
Yeah.
That's a little bit more twisted this way or that way. Now let's test it with a movement, one with gravity, one without gravity.
Yeah.
Like exactly. 3 strikes you're out, like it looks 100%. Weird. You're complaining about it and you have it with multiple movements. Like you probably will benefit from an intervention to this.
Exactly. And I think I should have been more clear on that. Like I look at posture and then as you said, I pair it up with some type of movement because it's like, hey, this is what I'm seeing. Let me see if that makes sense. Let me see if you either follow suit with the presentation that you're appearing with, like with that posture, or does something else happen? Do you roll on the table? Like, does your arch go away when you hit a certain range of hip flexion, right? And so the way that I organize and evolve is exactly for that reason. Like I start with the foot lecture and I assess the foot and like, hey, let's look at the feet. Let's see how the feet, the shin, the knee, how they are managing load. And then the next week we look at the full posture with movement. And then it's like, okay, we're looking at posture first, trying to gain as much information of these little things that, in my opinion, they do matter. Some people say it doesn't matter, but like I said, the people that I work with are people who have seen so many different people and didn't really get results. And I'm not saying that I always get the results that are intended. Like I don't, like everybody fails with it. But I think my probability of success is a little bit higher because I focus on this information and then I'm able to correlate it to movement to understand maybe why these things are happening. And then from there, it makes it easier to pick an exercise. Like the way that I always looked at like assessment was kind of like, how can I create the best X-ray or MRI vision goggles that I can using these movements to see what's going on, and then plug these into some type of machine, these numbers into a machine, and then an exercise gets spewed out. Do you know what I mean? Right. Like that kind of machine thought process. But yeah, no, I think, it can't be causal, like cause and effect. But it can provide us with some information as to potentially why something's happening.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I'm going to bring this back to my original question of, do you think fitness and rehab industry as a whole, I'm looking for a yes or no. No.
Okay. Yes or no. Okay.
But no, so this is just something I've actually been wrestling with, especially as, creating content, and it's like I took a marketing course and I spent way too much money on it. But, talking to like the mentor in it, going through and like showing him my assessment processes. And it's like I would take him through posture and I would find myself trying to communicate with people and be like, well, you have a shoulder that's rounded forward, but that's okay. And, I was trying to like tell them that it's okay that, posture matters, but it doesn't matter all at the
Mhm.
same time. It's just a snapshot. But this guy in the marketing course kept telling me over and over and over, he's like, no, like stop telling them that things are okay when they're really not. And I was like, man, like, okay, so from a marketing standpoint, if you're always continuously telling people that something's bad, you make sales,
Yes.
essentially,
Yes.
is what it
Yep.
comes down to. And
Yep.
so, I really think of fitness and rehab, like we're still in, I won't say we're in our infancy. I still think that the industry is, it's probably like its early teens.
100%. Like,
Like we're fucking up pretty bad.
oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Like,
100%.
it,
Well, like, you know what? Like when I started in this industry, I'm just like, okay, well, again, I started like going through fitness and stuff like that. And very hard to convince somebody to get fit. Like that's a very
right.
like, internal thing. Like you can't like externally, yes, you can get some influence and some persuasion to, get fit, but that doesn't last. Like it's kind of like it's kind of like a run. Like you kind of like sprint and then you get tired of it really quickly and then you move on. Whereas
Mhm.
like pain, I never had to convince anybody to come to me if they had pain,
Right.
right? I just had to make myself the go-to person for that. That was it.
Right.
But pain would constantly come in. And then you've got pain, you overcome pain, and you're like, okay, well, what are the next steps? Here are the next steps. Let's go through fitness. Let's make sure you're able to do this stuff without feeling pain. Right. And you're absolutely right. Like where a lot of people go in this industry is there's two ways that people are kind of messing up this industry, I think, is attacking other people, right? Because the body's so complex. In some regard, everybody's right, right? There just may be a better sequence, but the stuff they're doing isn't wrong. It's just like they just missed one step, maybe. And then the second thing is fear mongering, saying, hey, look, you're looking at this, like your shoulders are rounded forward, like you better do this. Otherwise, this is going to happen, or you're going to feel this kind of pain. And like the way that I always set my sessions up is I always start by them explaining to me, even if they said it to me in an email, doesn't matter to me. I want them to say it and I want to see their body language and stuff like that. So I'm coming in with already previous information, like insider trading information, essentially, right? Where I'm like, all right, they are telling me that, hey, like this is going on. Okay, great. I'm gonna ask them the same question and they're gonna tell me, and I'm gonna see all their body languages and see where they focus their attention on. They may come to me and they say, my shoulder's really bothering me. But the whole time they're looking down and they're feeling their hip, or they're like, pointing at their hip, and they're like, oh, I'm like, yeah, you never mentioned your hip on the email, right? But what that does to me is that gets their subjective story, and then it allows me to take the objective posture, objective movement, and relate it back to their story and say, hey, like when you were telling me that you felt some hip pain and stuff like this, like, well, this is what I'm seeing at the hips. This could be a reason why. It may not be, but it could be a reason why. And I explain it to them like that. So they're just like, instead of them saying, oh my God, I'm busted up, like I'm messed up, like whatever, it's more like, finally, somebody understands what I'm going through. They
Right.
finally get it. And so now it's a way where you can combine their subjective experience with you educating them that, hey, this is something like that I'm seeing. I'm with you. I totally get it. They feel relaxed now. And so that's how you got to do it, right? Like, and
Well, it's
like,
empathy at the end of the day. Like it's
it's
empathy
empathy.
versus a fear mongering.
Exactly. You're not trying like to say, like, I'll say this, and I'm not trying to blow air up my ass or anything like that. But, like when I was working in a clinic, they did, the clinic hired a manager because they wanted to market more. And I started right at the beginning of the clinic and stuff like that. And they did like analytics on So the metric was if they got an assessment and they stayed with you for at least 3 sessions, you would get 100% rating, right? So that is 100% conversion compliance, like they're staying with you, right? I got 99%. And this was over 8 months of people seeing me in assessment and them booking 3 sessions right away, right? And that was because it wasn't marketing that I read or anything like that. It was just something that like was, I don't know, like as you said, like more empathetic, where it's just like, what are you coming to me for? Explain it to me. Okay, great. I'm going to show you what I see and how that relates to what you're saying. So I keep in mind, hey, they're focused on their shoulder a lot. I'm going to look at this. Well, hey, look, if your foot hits the ground this way, it's going to affect your shoulder this way. Look at the range of motion in that right hip. You see how it's a little bit more limited and it's very similar to that left shoulder? Yeah. Do you see how that may affect your tennis serve, your follow through, and how that may pinch or whatever, right? Then I would do an intervention to show them, hey, look at the quick result we can get on movement, just really quickly, just very small movement. So then I provide them with some trust, some buy-in. They're like, okay, well, this person understands me. We can get some results. And then I gave them a plan. I said, look, if we want to do this and we want to get changes quickly, we got to create your body. We had to give your body a new habit. I always thought movement as a behavior, and it's a habit, right? We compensate as a habit. And so we have to do the exact same thing with exercise. If we look at the habit, there's a book, I can't remember the guy's name, but it's like The Power of Habit or something like that. Great book. It's basically talking about the habit cycle where you have a stimulus that causes a reaction and then you feel good. So like the example they gave in the book is like, you have an alcoholic, they feel stress. So their stimulus is stress. Their reaction to it to make them feel better is to drink, right? And then they feel better and they feel relaxed. And so we have to replace the drinking with an exercise, for example, right? Like they feel pain. We got to give them a solution, right?
Let's do Camperini deadlifts to
exactly.
Get out of alcoholism.
Exactly. That's it. No,
that's
but
simple.
Yeah, it's that simple. Solved the world right there. But no, it's like they have pain. We give them an exercise. We tell them, hey, here's a solution that we're going to use for that. And then they feel better. They feel more relaxed. And so I gave them a plan. I'm like, we need to front load this. We need to change the habit. Let's see. I want to see you twice a week or once every week for the next month. And then we can reevaluate our plan from there. I'll tell you this, after like I said that, like I usually said like 3 weeks to keep it small so they don't feel like they have to be with me forever, which some people try to do. Like they're like, you guys see me 3 times a week for the rest of your life to improve this, right? It's like, give a small, tangible goal and then the option to reassess. So then they feel in control again. And they never asked to reassess, right? They kept on staying with me. And that was just because I built a relationship with them and an understanding and made them feel good. So to answer your question, I do think that the rehab and the fitness industry is messing things up a little bit because of the people in it, right? Yeah. That's it. It's because people don't know enough about psychology. That's my interpretation.
We're still in like a tribalism, and there's just no organization to it. And then I also believe that there's no streamlined communication of terminology. Again, posture, for example, like there's so many different, like the way you and I talk about posture is completely different than an Athlete Next video with Jeff Cavalier talking about posture. And so exactly. it's really tough. And, then you have the regular Joe Schmo, Billy Bob over here, who just wants to look good and get out of pain. Yeah. And he just doesn't know what the hell to do. And it's confusing. I mean, I've been that person who's been in a ton of pain and it's like, what the what do I
Yeah.
fucking do? Like
Like, where do I go? But the
you
problem
have to
is,
like turn into a professional yourself before you even get out of pain. And
yeah.
that's ridiculous.
Yeah, I think a big problem is that we outsource to people outside of our industries. They don't understand. Like, look,
Yeah.
you hired a marketing person, right? What is their what do you hire them for? To get more clients, to build your client roster, to make more money,
Hmm.
to do these things, to get more audience, get more sales, whatever that may be, right? And so their main objective is to help you retain customers or gain new customers, right? And so they're going to do it at whatever means possible. They're going to say, hey, like they're scared and you're talking about pain,
Use it,
scare the shit out of them. You know
twist
what
the
I mean?
knife. Like
Yeah, exactly. Scare the shit out of them, right? Like, and I'm not saying not all marketers are like that, obviously, but their main objective is you're hiring me to get you results from the marketing perspective. Their medium is sales or clients. It's some quantitative number. Whereas we work in the realm of qualitative, where we have to make sure that we are not only improving numbers, they don't give a shit about numbers, right? Like they don't give a shit that their range of motion improves. They just want to feel better if we're in a pain perspective. So the best way that I have found to constantly retain clients is by you know providing them with a plan of action, right? Not like, hey, you're still messed up, like let me see you like every week. It's more like, hey, we did this, how do you feel? Great, let's move on, let's go to the next step. Great, let's go to the next step. Awesome, you graduated from this, what do you think about some training? Because now we've got to make sure that you can lock this in and you can do whatever you want. And so I just think that we outsource to industries that may not understand our industry, and they think that our domain, our industry is analogous to everybody else's, and it's not, right? You look at so early on in my career, like when I first got in, it was the exact same thing that you were talking about. I came in, I'm like, holy shit, there's so much information. There's like, where do I start? I have all these different people talking about different things. And so what I would do is I would go onto the people sites that I would respect, like Eric Cressy, Mike Robertson, and I think like Tony Gentilcore and stuff like that. And
even to
um,
find those guys, you have to sift through quite a bit of stuff.
exactly, you gotta read blogs, and then you got to see who they reference, and then you got to read that blog,
Yeah.
and then see who they reference, and then at the end of it, it's this one person, and then I'm just like, great, I don't care about these people. I'm going to follow this person. But
Right.
I used to look at the recommended readings, and I'd read all the books they recommended, because they recommend those are probably like foundation, right?
Hmm.
And from there, I'm just like, still a lot of information, not understand like where to go with things, right? Not
Right.
really understanding where I should start. And for me, what I did is I read those books and understand like functional anatomy and that stuff, but started looking at dynamic systems and learning about systems theory. And when you start to learn about that, you can understand how every single industry is integrated, but it's also separate, very clear, differentiated languages.
Hmm.
And so it's not always transferable. And so we bring other people into our industry that aren't in our industry, and then we get skewed messages. And
Right.
then that's where the confusion comes in.
That's yeah, and I think too, it being in such a what's the word I'm looking for? An industry that is saturated, especially fitness. I would say
Yeah.
rehab. I would say is probably right up there with it at this point. But
Yeah.
it's a super easy marketing tactic to go after negative type of
Yep.
marketing essentially. And so
Mhm.
that said, it's almost a principle or not a principle, a morality question at play of, well, you have a business, yes, but how do you make a business when everything's saturated and you can't get enough people, but then you have this strategy of marketing that's super effective,
Yeah.
but you're fucking everybody up. like
Yeah. Yeah.
like I don't know. Like it's really tough to do. And maybe it's like you bring someone in with that negative marketing and then you desensitize them, but then your marketing is probably the problem
Yeah.
in a way. So that's one point.
Tough
And
balance.
yeah, tough. I mean, I know what side I'm going to be on for sure. And it's going to be the side
Yeah.
of I'm going to like, I want to demystify ever as much as I can out there. Like that's why I still like I think a lot of people are scared to talk about posture. And that's something that I like, we've talked about it a lot, but even talking about it here today, like I'll make posts about it and people are like, posture doesn't matter, posture, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well,
Yeah.
there's still people out there that are freaking the hell out because they have a shoulder that's lower than the other. And they've been told for
Yeah.
years that they can't bench press and they can't do an exercise.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like we need to clarify some things for people out there around this word.
Yeah. Like people focus on posture because you can see it. It's
Yeah.
tangible. Like, hey, my head's forward. What's going on there? Like, why is that happening? And then, like I've worked with enough people. I've worked my 10,000 plus hours with people, like one-on-one with people. Like there are some years when early on in my career, I was working like 70 hours a week, right? Like I
Mhm.
was crushing it with hours just to get my reps in. So I've worked with enough people to say that posture does matter.
Right.
And the
I,
people who don't think it, they always come to me too. They're just like, oh, this research article says there's no prediction. I'm like, when have I ever said that this is going to predict injury? Never. And I never
exactly.
will. Just like movement can never predict injury. Can it provide us with a understanding of what this person is doing? Sure. But I could look at the same, I could look at 10 people with 10 different injuries or 10 different issues and all move the exact same way. It's just for some reason that pain came up somewhere else, came up in
For
the
that
shoulder for this person,
individual.
for that individual,
Right.
right? And it's why does that happen? No one knows. And I don't
No.
think we'll ever know. There's too many variables at play. Like you have to have somebody in a closed room, dark room, and just monitor them, and they can't do anything unless you tell them. Then you'll be able to see. But that's not ethical. You can't do that to people. So never be able to measure it. And so maybe people who send me research articles say, oh, like this doesn't predict injury or like posture, like does posture matter or whatever like that. Where do you see this in the research? I'm like, look, when I work like with enough people and done enough hours, I think I've earned the right to understand there's research and understand the research, but also push the envelope a little bit where I'm going beyond research because honestly, we are the ones that are going to push research. Think about it. The research that's out there, why does more research come on? Like why do we study more things? Because there's a hole somewhere. Who determines the hole? The people who are working in it. Because the people who are researching in a lab, they could be working with people, don't get me wrong, but there's other people out there being like, hey, I researched all this stuff. Yeah, like, I'm working with somebody who kind of defies the research right now. And so what do? Well, I'm just going to test a couple theories. Look, it worked. Great. Now what I want to do is I've done this with enough people, my sample size. It's not a theoretical, like it's not a written research paper submitted to some board for approval. It's like, hey, I've worked with enough people to say this has worked for me. I'm going to share it, see what people think. Oh, where's the research for that? It's like, my personal anecdotal research, great. Evidence based. Yeah, that's what it is. Do I care? No. But should I, like, honestly though, like it's important to understand there's research and to follow the research so you're not going way beyond into some realm of craziness, right? But you
I,
also got
well,
to understand you got to push it a bit.
right. And it's again, it's the absolutes. Like you saying the posture doesn't matter. It's the same thing as like, well, your biomechanics of your joints doesn't matter.
Yeah,
Like it's
exactly.
still like it's still there. It's still tangible. I look at it as like, it's something a fourth grade bully can make fun of. Like it
Exactly.
matters,
Yeah,
like people
exactly.
care about it and how they like the last I had someone make a comment on one of my posts, and he's like, you know, there was like an argument in the section about like rounded shoulders and how that occurs and all this stuff. And the guy was like, last time I checked, no one wants to be hunched over like Quasimodo,
Yeah.
and they feel okay about that. Like,
Exactly. Yeah.
like
Well,
it,
like if you read, okay, there's two books. One, polyvagal theory. So if you
yep.
look at polyvagal theory, it talks about the different kinds of positions. So the different kinds of, like I call it postures, but different kinds of like expressions of like nervous system. There's your fight or flight, there's your rest and digest, and there is your immobility, where you basically freeze. And those people are the ones who are just so sympathetically driven that their body just shuts down. And the way that the analogy they used was, think of like an animal who's getting attacked and they just play dead, because what they
Mhm.
want to do is want to bring down their heart rate, bring down their blood pressure. So the other animal doesn't think they're a threat anymore, so it's not going to attack them anymore, right? And so like the way that I look at it, that is like you have people who have very high blood pressure, fight or flight. You have people who have low blood pressure, heart rate, very passive, like type B type personalities, right? And you got the people who are just like defeated and just like your end game arrows. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like those really hunched over, head forward, like people were walking with a walker, like those kind of people, those postures, right? So there's a huge emotional and well-researched emotional and neurological connection with posture. And then secondly, you take a look at Jordan Peterson's book, 12 Rules of Life, I think. In
Yep.
his first chapter, he talks about how the sympathetic nervous system of a lobster is similar to us as humans. And that when lobsters see like another lobster or whatever, I think it's a lobster or crab. It's one of the two. I
It's a
can't remember.
lobster.
Lobster. And like the lobster puffs up its chest as soon as he sees somebody of threat or sees another lobster of threat. So it's like it encompasses this posture which reflects like the way they're feeling, and it drives like this um, intention or intended movement to happen. Like I'm
Right.
ready to fight. I'm getting all my systems organized and ready to fight. So look, it's well researched that posture does matter, right? From a neurological, emotional standpoint, right? Does it predict that I'm going to trip and fall and hurt myself? No. But
Mm.
does this
I mean, if you
maybe
got a
actually,
walker, like,
maybe you got a walker, you got external stuff. Yeah. But what it does do, it says, hey, look, like if you're constantly rounding your shoulders forward, you're constantly having your center of gravity over your toes, that's stressful on your body, right? I mean, like you're constantly just like loading your spine or constantly loading certain joints excessively, or joints don't have the opportunity to absorb force because of the position they're in. So it's like we can make associations. Is it going to happen? Maybe not. If it does happen, there could be a reason how that could be associated.
right.
Right.
Definitely. No,
So
I'm with you, man. I think that's a good explanation of it. And two, it's just we would be, again, if posture and from a neurological sense has been well researched, how does that not have an effect on biomechanics?
exactly.
Like you can't. It's like one plus one equals two.
Yeah. I love the people who are like only biomechanical and the other people who are only neurological, and they say that each other don't matter. And Yonda said that the biomechanics system is a representation of the what's happening on the nervous system, right? So
Right.
if my chest puffed up all the time, I'm sympathetically driven. If my chest collapsed all the time, I'm more like close to immobilized, parasympathetic, I guess you could say, right? Where
Mhm.
I'm more relaxed, but I'm still under threat in some way, but I'm just not like going all the time. So,
Right.
you know, and that causes muscle contractility. And like, again, you look at like a guy like Leon Chaitow, he talks about a Looms model of hyperventilation. And you look at it, it's like a feed forward system where it's like You breathe heavy. That causes more anxiety. That causes more changes in your pH level of your blood. That causes your lung capacity to go down. That causes more anxiety, and it keeps on going. And so it's all gonna, and then that's gonna affect your posture. And he actually says that it's gonna affect your posture. You're gonna have rounded shoulders and all that stuff. So it's gonna affect it. Posture matters. For everybody listening, posture matters.
He said it. He said it. Oh my gosh. That's the name of the episode right there.
Posture
Alex
matters.
Effer said posture matters.
Yeah, done deal.
Well, I think that's a fantastic spot to go ahead and close it out there. Alex, thank you so much for coming on the show, man. If you don't mind, hit us with the like where to find you, anything else you want to plug, man, like go at it, go crazy.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you, Kyle. Like I said, like know each other for 2 years. I consider you a friend, and look forward to coming down to Cincinnati.
You got to come down, man. Sometimes Ryan Patrick's been hounding you. I know he has about getting down here.
I know we gotta. I'm gonna organize that with him actually. So yeah, to get an in-person course. But yeah, no, for me, I'm only on Instagram right now. I need to get on TikTok soon, but and YouTube.
On YouTube.
I know YouTube's coming too, and renovating the gym downstairs and make that a recording studio. But yeah, so I'm on Instagram at alex.effer. So my first name dot last name. That's where all my content is. Like I said, like we've talked about, I host my Evolve mentorship, which basically takes all the principles that I'm talking about, puts into 8 weeks in a progressive manner. So we talk about systems, and we talk about gait, walking, breathing, assessment, programming, and we apply it all in case studies. So that's kind of like the mega course. That's really where we get all encompassing. And then I've got my 2 other upper and lower body programs that honestly, a lot of people who take Evolve, they go through those programs as well, because it helps you understand how to apply these principles. And then finally, when you graduate from Evolve, we got something called Vault Mentorship, which is just like a continuing education. Yeah, we don't want to tell anybody.
It's a well-kept secret.
A well-kept secret, exactly. Yeah, I would like to keep it small. But yeah, no, it's just where everybody who has kind of similar mindset, we're getting on calls bi-weekly, talking about some of the stuff we talked about in Evolve and how we're applying that. And then additionally, the people in Vault also get access to the tutorials from Evolve. And really where the tutorials are is really where a lot of new information is coming from. And so I like to keep that like that, so that Vault people are also getting brought up with the new Evolve information. So yeah, I got Evolve, Vault, and the upper and lower body program so far. So check that out on my website, resilientrehab.com. And yeah, again, thanks so much, Kyle.
Of course, man. Thank you so much for doing this. And we will see you all in the next one.